while Jatayu is trying to rescue Sita, while Ravana is carrying Sita to Sri Lanka. So the government made this rock cement concrete sculpture.
So yeah, that was my dad, who I recently spent a month traveling around southern India with. And it was a chance to see him vacate this role of being a parent that I always knew him as, and instead be this figure for nostalgia that came to life as he was reminiscing and reliving his childhood there. We spent the days precipitously weaving through the traffic-clogged streets on mopeds, only pausing to down cups of scalding hot tea, as my dad would narrate his sentimental history of the prominent landmarks, the former friends we met, and the rich foods we devoured in the different cities we traveled to. These conversations felt like a kind of multidisciplinary lecture, with a convergence of history, linguistics, science, sociology, and art, to name a few. For example, my dad would harp on the beauty of the language we spoke, Telugu, constantly referring to it as the Italian of the East. And it is just that. Italian and Telugu are similar in the sense that both languages consist of words that end entirely in vowels, or the symbiotic relationship that religion and art possessed, as the dances of Hindu gods played out in vibrant marbled sequences on the pillars of temples standing steadfast for centuries, demarcating the status of Hinduism as the world's oldest religion. We also went to a science-themed children's park near where my dad grew up. Here he is observing the beauty of centrifugal force. It was a surprise to hear this depth and breadth of knowledge from someone who I'd only ever known as a stoic family man with an IT job. And it's a testament to how your love for a place can strengthen through your memory of it. The Telugu word for memory is Nyapakasakti. When you break down the word, it can literally translate to knowing power, which feels like the most poetic way to describe the idea of it. To know something gives you power, as knowing something will give you that material to build a stronger foundation for your life. So to know the story of your ancestors, who made you who you are, can give you power over yourself. The knowledge of a past that you are not a part of can be the key to a future that you can make your own. It's beautiful to me how this interpretation of memory as a source of strength is encoded in the language itself. Normally someone who doesn't open up much, my dad let the warm embrace of this nostalgia intoxicate him, relinquishing the memories of a different time. So I wanted to share some of that history here because I was touched by the way he could revive it. There are countless immigrant stories like my dad's, but there are also none like it. And it's just a reminder that those seemingly inconsequential details in the present can give a story its thumping heartbeat many steps into the future. My dad grew up in a city called Tirupati, in the state of Andhra Pradesh in southern India. And his childhood was just like any of ours really, full of restless energy. He was the type of kid who would rally everyone on the block early in the morning and late in the evening for games of soccer, cricket, field hockey, whatever sport it was. A simple life of rigorous school days bookended by the cathartic release of sports. But it was more about the friends in these sports. No matter what hardships you face, it really is true that it's your friends who have the best chance of lifting you out of that hole. It doesn't have to be through anything profound or philosophical. Simply from the common open-minded spirit for movement and adventure come the bonds of lifelong friendships. This is the type of community that my dad would become adept at building. He would later move to the city of Bangalore for his undergrad, majoring in mechanical engineering and making close friends through this academic trauma, picking up an MBA as well, and eventually settling in the city of Chennai to work in the riveting business of aluminum extrusion sales. Through this academic and professional journey, he picked up multiple languages, because in India, each state is organized by its unique language. Hearing all this, it forced me to confront some assumptions I had subconsciously held. In India, my dad had less than what was in the typical Western household, but because of that, I assumed that he struggled. In reality, he was really just living a humble success, the satisfaction that came with it. So I had to ask, why did he decide to leave? For some more context, it wasn't just my dad. He had two younger brothers. The youngest worked in hotel management and jumped around with various business ventures, even opening up his own restaurant for a few years in the 2000s. But the middle brother's story was one of struggle. Chronic complications with his kidneys conspired against him throughout his life. To help him out, my dad would dare his luck in the United States. The vision was to make an American salary to find the best treatment for his brother back home. But he admits now that maybe this was a naive understanding of the journey he was about to embark on. Migration follows the law of labor. Where there is a labor demand, the migration patterns will converge upon it. At the turn of the millennium, with the economy marching upwards on the backs of the internet, and the dastardly deeds of all these tech companies, there emerged a cavernous labor shortage that skilled workers could jump into. My dad was one of these lucky people, and soon enough, an employer would agree to sponsor him on a program known as the H-1B visa. The H-1B program was signed into existence by the 1990 Immigration Act, for it allows American employers to sponsor immigrants skilled in science and engineering disciplines to fill a perceived domestic shortage of this type of labor. It's how many Asian immigrants were able to secure passage to the US, with the majority coming from India and China. In 2023, for example, 72% of approved petitions were from Indian workers, and 12% were from Chinese workers. However, this program is steeped in a misty brew of elusive luck. Only 65,000 applications are approved each year, and inevitably, when the number of applications exceeds that amount, it ends up going to a lottery system. Once my dad's H-1B status was approved, he was set to work for his employer in Detroit. Entering the US with only $20 in his pocket, one of his famous lines, he decided to make a fateful stop in Los Angeles to visit some college friends who had also recently moved there. I like to ask my dad pretty often to tell me about what his first day in America was like, because it's pretty ridiculous. He went to see a Telugu movie with his friends, and apparently it was common practice for companies' HR representatives at the time to prowl around these movies in search of eligible young Indian men to fill their IT jobs. Who knew being a stereotype could help out so much? The recruiter found my dad and conducted the live equivalent of the "Are you a robot?" test and offered him a position at an IT consultancy firm. And my dad accepted, deciding then to quit that job in Detroit. I like to think it was the pull of friendship that led to this spontaneous decision. Without gravity, the planets would inevitably fall out of orbit, but that one force exists that keeps us in line. That's what our friendships can do for us. This was in 1998. In 2000, my dad still wasn't married yet. In India, it's a common tradition for parents to arrange their kids in an arranged marriage, but it can be a pretty fast turnaround from the day you meet to the day you get married. And for my parents in this case, I think it was about a month. After my dad finished working for his client, he went back to India to get married. But the day after he got married, this client would call him and tell him he had a job at the company if he came back immediately, as they were so impressed with his work. So he did. He's been there for the past 25 years. My mom came shortly after too, don't worry. But in that same year of 2000, my dad's middle brother passed away from his health complications. America was never going to give my dad that much money that quickly to save him. A little while after, my grandpa got into a car accident that left him with amnesia. And my dad would be calling him late into the night to try and coax a reluctant memory back into a painful existence. He'd admit to me, yeah, that was a rough year. It wasn't the first time I'd heard this story, but every time I hear it, it feels like a broken promise. He came thinking he was a triumphant worker in demand, ready to take control of his own future. But instead, he was a commodity, exploited by the greedy hands of this industry. With the unfair demise of his younger brother, who he couldn't even say goodbye to, and the fling with death his dad had endured as well, he was now trapped in a country that could discard him if he put a foot out of line. His friends convinced him to stay and not give up, because there were better things for those who had hope. But that decision, of course, came with its sacrifices.
We missed the relationship between the parents and the family members, and then I thought I'll come back in 5 years, but that didn't happen because of the family. When kids born and they got used to their commitments with the kids commitments with the studies are other activities. So we miss that thing when you shared with us. Like, the gap was increased between the family members and the grandparents.
I don't want to end this in a mood of regret. I don't want you to think you have to pity my dad. Despite all the odds and the slowly thinning connection to home and family, the thing that remained consistent was that he remained dedicated to the present while he was here. But for him to do that, he succeeded in finding community. He never really looked for anyone, from what I remember, yet people showed up, and then he would show up for them too. Friends discovered from a network of employment abroad would lead to friends who opened up restaurants and grocery stores and played cricket and volleyball at the park. He prevailed in building a second home here, where I felt connected to a culture he thought he had to leave behind 25 years ago. A privilege that not every descendant of immigrants gets to experience. There's a lot more that happened too, but I'll leave all of that behind the glass display of this museum. I did feel removed from all of this and all the generations that went through so much to give me the life I have now. Hearing all of this, I felt like a little boy sitting on the edge of a pond, watching the ripples from whatever rocks or sticks or leaves that fallen in. But the ripples of this historical debris eventually returned to invite me in. By experiencing these ripples, I feel more powerful. And with this power, I feel more pride. It's something that various incidents of racism and other microaggressions, in real life and on the internet, had chipped away at over the years. The pride I should have felt, but instead didn't, of being Indian. Don't get me wrong. I feel thankful for the opportunities I've gotten and the life I've led. And there were some parts of my culture that did leave a sour taste in my mouth. But the truth is, complete assimilation will lead to forgetfulness. And with that disappearance goes the power of your ancestors. And with that loss of power, you lose a big part of it as well. And I don't want to keep losing that power anymore. And despite whatever efforts you make to assimilate, nothing will change the fact that you look the way you do. But knowing this history is now a storied shield for me. It's a constant reminder of what my ancestors went through to challenge for these opportunities, to push your way through obstacles that some people will never know anything about. Because how many people can say they know about the struggles of securing this visa? I've gained more confidence from knowing that I'm part of a culture that taught my parents how to fight for a place in a world that can be so unforgiving, and yet still be honorable people after it all. So I pity the people who are so misinformed about what it means to be Indian. And to my dad, who sacrificed so much for the generation after him, and for the community behind him, I only feel an endless gratitude. It compounds when I look through old photo albums of him when he was a kid, filling me with a vicarious nostalgia. The message these monochromatic film photos and those grainy VCR recordings send to me across time: your selflessness will take you far in life, across impassable distances and over insurmountable obstacles. You made it here, despite all the challenges, simply because you wanted to help someone else. And you've never lost sight of that. And in the process of your historic life, you've also helped so many other people along the way. I hope I can make you proud and continue the tradition of sacrifice and service for others. Thanks, old man.